All right. Well, welcome to our discussion of Parshat Pinchas. Pinchas as the hero of the book of Bemidbar. I'd like to make the argument that Pinchas is not a minor character in the book of Bemidbar, as we might think. Sometimes there are people who probably never even heard of Pinchas. They think Pinchas is just a little story, the end of Balak, and there was a problem. He solved the problem, and that's it. But actually, it can be argued that Pinchas is the true hero of the book of Bemidbar. He really saves the day and makes Bemidbar all better again. So let's try to understand a little bit about how it fits into the book of Bemidbar and why it's so significant. I'm going to this time share screen with you, and we'll take a look at what I've presented. We think of Pinchas as the hero of the book. We have to understand, what is this book all about? Well, we've talked about it in other sessions this semester, this book, but today we focus on Pinchas. So we've argued that it's a book of grassroots leadership, that it was very important that people be there helping Moshe in leading the Jews. Grassroots in the sense that there should be other leaders other than Moshe, and grassroots in the sense that the masses should be involved. So it's a book about shared leadership. There should be other people other than Moshe leading the Jews, and it's about how the followers should be great as well. And to the extent that there are any sins in this book, it's about the leadership and it's about the masses. The grassroots. How do we know that it's a book of grassroots? So the first couple of verses in the whole book say that Moshe is told to count the Jews. And with you, Moshe and Aaron will be ish lamateh, one man per tribe. This idea that Moshe was to be accompanied by leaders from each tribe represents not only the idea that every tribe would be involved and that there would be leaders, but also that every person would be involved. And that's why we count every single person. But Moshe was never told to just lead by himself. In fact, in Parshat Balotcha, Moshe complains. He says, "Are you kidding? I'm supposed to lead the Jews like a mother carries a child? Are the Jews not going to play any role in helping me with this? I can't do that all by myself." And that's why it's known as Chomesh HaPekudim, the book of Numbers. Numbers, why is that a good name for a book? Numbers, counting. That's the most important thing that happened in this book, is counting? Yes, because the counting means that every Jew counts and every person stands on their flag and they all march forward. They're all soldiers. Ishal Machaneo, Ishal Diglo, every person on their flag, in their camp. And we march forward and we conquer Israel together. Every single Jew. Of course, we have leaders. We have tribal leaders. We have groups of 3 tribes. There's a leader of those 3 tribes. There's a whole system. But every person is supposed to count. When we talk about the book as a grassroots involvement, we can show it across the whole book. We have the idea that everyone counts. We have the idea that each person stands proudly at their flag. We have the contribution of every single tribe. Each tribe brought the same thing. They brought gifts. They participated. The Pesach Sheni, we see that every Jew wants to be involved. No one wanted to be left out. Why should we be left out? They said, we want to have the Pesach Sheni. We want to have an opportunity to bring the Pesach. And therefore, any of the sins that took place in these two realms. The masses didn't want to go to Israel. And who told them not to go? The leaders, the very leaders who were supposed to be with Moshe. They were the ones who sinned. And who said that the whole nation are righteous? See, Korach understood the whole mentality of the book of Bemidbar, the idea perhaps of the whole Torah, that everyone counts, that everyone's holy. And that was the sin, that he claimed that everyone was just as holy, and there were no gradations within Israel against the idea of Moshe and Aaron and leadership and Kahuna and Leviah and the whole idea of leadership. So, but who joined Korach? Well, it's hard to say what the masses thought, but God wanted to kill the masses because God understood that the masses were simply passively standing by to see, I wonder who wins, Korach or Moshe. And therefore God was ready to destroy all the Jewish people because the masses sinned. The masses sinned by following the spies who were leaders. The masses sinned by following Korah, who was a leader. So it's a sin of the masses and it's a sin of the leadership, both in the case of the spies and the case of Korah. And then in the end, we have these women. Women always represent the idea that everyone's involved. The Benot Tzlafcha, they want to be involved too. They don't want to be left out. And so we see the idea of the necessity of group involvement and the sin of group think that's against God. This very important in the book of Bemidbar, good leadership, good followership of the masses. And who are supposed to be the leaders? We need to understand who were the leaders among the Jews. Well, after all, it's a book of leadership. And what's the main, what are the key words in the book? Well, I'll show you. The Nesiim were very important in this book. One of the key things with Nesiim, the tribal leaders. The leaders are listed 4 times at the beginning of the book. There's the same people, the same names. We know their names, and it says it over and over again. They keep listing them. In Parshat Shlach, each one was a Nasi. He was a leader. Korach, his people were Nesiei Da, Krei Moed Ansei Shem. He had 250 people with him. They were all Nesiim, lifted him above the crowd. People of a famous name. And who did the sin for which Pinchas atoned? It was Nasi Beidah Shimoni. It was someone who was a Nasi, a leader from Shimon. Benot Tzavchad approached Moshe and the Nesiim to ask for land. The Rashi Matot have a special parsha. The only parsha in the Torah addressed to the heads of the tribes, because it's a book about Nesiim. Midian, the whole story, the spoils of war, whether we should kill them and how we should kill them and how it worked, and what happened to the spoils. It was adjudicated by Moshe, Aaron, and the Nesiim. Reuven and Gad approached Moshe and the Nesiim, and then it was adjudicated by Moshe and the Nesiim and Yoshua. Masei, the new Nesiim, are listed by name. And the case of Menashe versus Benot Tzlafchad is adjudicated by Moshe and, you guessed it, the Nesiim. So in the book of Bemidbar, the Nesiim play a crucial role in every single case. However, it's also a book of other leaders. Another type of leader is the Levite. It's a book of Levites. In Bemidbar, we count the Israelites and then count the Levites. We exchange the Levites for the firstborn, right? Why? Because the Levites were so good at the golden calf, right? That we needed to exchange them with and they became holy, and the firstborn became not holy because they sinned with the golden calf. Bemidbar lays out a role for 1/3 of the Levite tribes. In Parshat Naso, the role of the other Levite tribes. Levite. In Baalotcha, we do have one section about a Kohen, and then the dedication of the Levites to wave them and lift them up. In Parshat Shlach, it's strange. Here, the Jews are sinning, the leaders are sinning, and what is the role of the Levites? Where are the Levites? What happens to them Levites who used to save the Jews in the days of the golden calf? Where are they now? In Korach, it's not that the Levites didn't do anything. The Levites are the problem. Whereas in the book of Shemot, who saved the day? The Levites. They're the ones who were willing to take up arms against the sinners of the golden calf. But in the book of Bemidbar, the sin of Korach is perpetuated and perpetrated by what? By the Levites. The Levites become the problem. They are the problem. So what happens in Parshat Pinchas? Also later on, we'll talk about the story of Pinchas in a moment. We count the people and we count the Levites. Again the Levites. Parshat Masei, there are Levite cities. This book is loaded with Levites. You might call it not the book of Leviticus is the book of Levites. The book of Numbers is the book of Leviticus because it's all about Levites. But they're part, I would argue, of the general system of leadership. They're Nesiim, the heads of each tribe, and there are Levites. They're also in charge. It's also a book where firstborn play a prominent role. In the story of Bemidbar and the tribes and the camps around the tabernacle, Reuven is listed first. Sometimes, after in the travels, Judah comes first, but Reuven is listed first because he's Bechor Yisrael. It mentions that he's the firstborn. They're also supposed to be leaders. They are switched with the Levites, but they're important. The flag groups have Reuven, who's the first of Leah, and Dan is also the head of one of the camps. He's the first of Zilpah. And the Bechorim, of course, switch with the Levites because the Bechorim, the firstborn, are important. The rebellion of Korach is not only rebellion of Levites, who are supposed to be leaders, but also Datan and Aviram. What are they? They are from the tribe of Reuven. What is he? Firstborn, because the firstborn are rebelling. They were supposed to be part of the leadership. Instead, they rebel. Korach is a firstborn, the next brother of Amram. So if birth order is important, Korach argues, says Rashi, that he's next in line after Amram, Moshe's father. He and his family should be next in line. So it's a book of Nesiim, leaders. It's a book of Levites, and it's a book of firstborn. So what is the worst, and therefore in the end the best thing that happened in this book? Let's take a look at the book. What's the worst thing that happened? Well, the Midonim complained there was a fire, and it destroyed some of the leaders or some of the followers. The Afsafsuf had a makara bamiod. They had a bad attack. Miriam was one of the leaders. She was punished with leprosy. The spies had national condemnation to wander in the desert for 40 years. Korach was swallowed up and burnt. He was swallowed. His other people were burnt. And post Korach, another complaining, and then 14,700 died. But in the story of Zimri, the story which Pinchas saves, where Pinchas saves the day, you know what happens? 24,000 people die. So whatever was wrong with the Zimri story, whether it's because it's an act of licentiousness, whether it's an act of immorality, whether it was because it was an act done by a leader, a licentious act done by a leader of the Jews, whether it's because as you enter the land of Israel, you have to be pristine and holy, and the Jews were committing an act of immorality. Whatever it was, this was clearly, as you see from this chart, clearly the worst point in this book is the story of Zimri. However, we need to understand that, as we've pointed out in other lectures, it's sort of it's the low point of the book, but you have to understand the full context. We mentioned Bemidbar, we begin to encamp and get ready to leave, get ready to go to Israel. Nassau and Baalotcha, everything's moving forward, beautifully moving upward. Everybody wants to be part of the action, until we started complaining. We complained in Baalotcha, we complained, we did the sin of the spies in Shlach. Korach was the low point in the bad part of the story. When the Jews were doing poorly, overall the Dow Industrial Index was down. Korach was the low point of that down point. Then the Jews start to improve. And Chukat, the Jews repent. The Jews march forward. The Jews conquer. They have 4 victories. And so that was the good part. That's not the downturn of the market. Pinchas is a blip. Pinchas is an aberration, but it's not a blip where you say that's not important. It was a blip that had the potential to undermine the entire enterprise of the Jewish people. You cannot come in to conquer the land of Israel claiming that you're more moral. If your leaders, the head of the tribe of Shimon, committed a public act of fornication in front of Moshe, you can't conquer the land of Israel. So this was not a blip. This was going to be a downturn. That would be the lowest point in the book of Bemidbar. This would be the absolute lowest low moment in this book. And in fact, it could have destroyed the entire enterprise of the Jews being the Jewish people, or the Jews entering the land of Israel. But Pinchas luckily saved the day. And as we see, everything improved from there. So it was the worst point, and it was also the best point of this book. It's really where things start kicking and things start going. Pinchas is a big deal. How do we know Pinchas is a big deal? Because in Psalm 106, it says a review of Jewish history. So it says about, splitting the sea and things like that. And it says the Jews worshipped idolatry. Maybe that's why it was the low point, not because of immorality, because of idolatry. And what type of idolatry? To Peor. The rabbis say that Baal Peor is a particularly despicable kind of immorality related to licentiousness. And they, part of the worship of it, we offered to the dead. A terrible plague broke out. 24,000 people. What happened? By Amot Pinchas, by Yifalel. Moses stood, Pinchas stood up. He did something. Here it's attributed that he prayed, that he judged. He did something, and this plague stopped. We know in our parsha that he stood up. He speared the sinners. He speared the sinners as they were sinning. He did a violent act, even though he was from the Kohen family, supposedly a peaceful family. He did a violent act and stopped the plague. Everyone was shocked into repentance. This was thought for a merit for all generations. This is a big deal. Pinchas was remembered forever for what he did. It's codified in Psalm 106 as a highlight of the desert history. So it would have been a low point if not for Pinchas. He turned back God's anger against all of the Jews as he avenged God's vengeance. I did not destroy the Jews. I would have destroyed them all. It's interesting when the Jews sinned, God turns to Moshe and he says, destroy all the Jews. Well, there's a debate. Does it mean destroy all the sinners? Or take the leaders of Israel? Destroy the leaders. I'm sick of these leaders. They're not doing anything. So was the commandment to destroy the leaders? Or was the commandment to destroy the followers of the poor, those who sinned? It's not clear. And when Pinchas saves the day, he saves the day on behalf of the leaders. Because Moshe was staying there, he said, I can't take it. I can't do it. I can't solve the problem myself. I can't be the only one who's doing anything here. So when Pinchas stood up and he did something, it showed that there were other leaders. There were people other than Moshe who were doing something to save the day. We continue. Therefore, Lachen Amor, how big a deal is Pinchas? What does God say? For Pinchas and his children, there will be a kahuna forever. Does that mean his children will be Kohanim Gedolim? Does that mean that despite the fact that he killed someone, he's still able to be a Kohen? Does that mean that he wasn't really a Kohen until now because he was too young when his parents were inaugurated, and he's not a child of a Kohen who was inaugurated? He was a child of a Kohen before he was inaugurated. But in any event, Pinchas has a special breed. Nobody has a special breed. The Jewish people have a covenant. David has a covenant. I would say the only other individual who has a covenant with God is Pinchas. That's a big deal. Why? Because he was vengeful for God and he atoned for the Jewish people. So Pinchas, a very big deal. The question is, what's it a big deal about? Why Pinchas? What is it? Whom does Pinchas represent? For whom is he a tikkun? So I want to make the following argument. If you're Pinchas and you were born before you were a small child when your parents were inaugurated, so you never became a Kohen. So then who are you if you're not a Kohen, but you're born to a Kohen father? You know what you are? You're a Levi. Pinchas is a tikkun of the Levim. Pinchas is a makeup. Pinchas is a fixing. Namely, Pinchas stands up as a Levite. And he, after all, his father is the Nasi Nisieh Levi. His father is the prince of all Levites. Because he's a Kohen, but he's also a prince of Levites. And he spears the enemy. He takes care of it. He does exactly what they did in the golden calf. He killed the sinners. However, as we'll see in a moment from the Sphard-Beth, Pinchas is also every man. Pinchas is just, he represents anybody. Because Rashi claims that he wasn't yet a Kohen. Because the Torah says, I'm giving you to be a Kohen. I thought his father was a Kohen, his grandfather was a Kohen. Yes, but I'm making you a Kohen. You weren't a Kohen before him. You know who you were? You were nobody. You were everybody. You were every man, and you saved the day. And perhaps we can argue he's some sort of he's making up for the Nesiim. The Nesiim, God says, kill the Nesiim. I'm sick of it. Nobody's doing anything. And that's one way of reading the verse at the end of Parshat Balak that God told Hokaotam, kill the Nesiim. Pinchas saved the day for the Nesiim, that there is leadership with Moshe. Moshe was staying there. He says, where's my help? And Pinchas stands up, takes the place of the Nesiim, and he saves the day. And then Pinchas becomes a leader like the Nesiim. When Moshe goes on various expeditions in the book, he takes Pinchas with him. The rabbis call him Mashuach Milchama. He's the Kohen you bring with you when you go to war. He's like a Nasi, perhaps. Then he functions as a Kohen, one of the strata of society, Kohen. And Korach was a Levi. And yet he wanted to be a Kohen, right? Pinchas is a Levi, and he wants to be a Kohen. He wants to be a leader. And if the Kohanim are, according to the Ramban, are if they need to, they stand up and they lead the Jews like the Maccabees, then that's what Pinchas did. He said, look, I'm a Kohen, or I'm son of a Kohen, grandson of a Kohen, but I have no choice. I have to defile myself and connect myself to impurity of defiling, of killing this man and this woman, because when the time comes for it, the Kohen has to lead. Or if you take the Rambam's approach that the Maccabees were sinful for taking the leadership, Pinchas is saying, look, I have no choice. I have to take a non-Kohen role, a leadership role here, because no one else is doing anything. If there's no one else to rise up and do something, you've got to do it. So I'm going to play that role. Pinchas, even though usually the Kohanim are there to bring life, I'm going to take a life, because that's going to shock everyone and make them realize that we've got to stop this immorality. We've got to stop this idolatry. And from then on, we don't hear anything about that. The Jews are not doing idols. In fact, no one else sins in the rest of this book. In fact, no one else dies in the end of this book. In fact, Moshe can function so well from now on because he has helpers. That's what Moshe lacked. He explained to God, he said, look, I can't carry them like a baby. They've got to stand and walk on their own. Pinchas is the one who stands up and walks on his own. Where the next generation comes and says, we can do it. We will help you out. You're not on your own. Who stood up for the Jews when the golden calf took place? They said to their father and their mother, I don't know you. I don't know my children. They followed the commandments. They listened to Moshe and they killed whoever it was, relative or not. They killed them if they worshipped the idol. It says in Exodus that what happened, Moshe stood at the gate of the camp and he said, who is with me? And who came? The Levites came. And Moshe said, put your sword on your loins, go from gate to gate and kill every person who worshipped the idols. The sons of Levi did what Moshe said, and they killed 3,000 people. Pinchas was just like that type of Levi, and he stood up and he killed that couple, and that shocked everyone into submission. And never again in this book was there any problem, because Pinchas showed the way, he led the way. He was a true Levi, and he saved the day in this book of Leviim, full of Leviim. How did the Levites fare in the book of Bemidbar? Well, they didn't stand up when there was a problem. They didn't stand up. They were inaugurated. They were dedicated. They were consecrated. But then when the moment came to lead, what happened? They didn't guard the holy sanctuary. They didn't help in the spies. They're totally silent. They were the problem in the Korach. And now Pinchas stands up and Pinchas saves the day. An important moment, yes, because the Levites are redeemed. Every man is redeemed. As the Sphard-Beth explains, Parshas Pinchas, very beginning, and I had thought of this on my own, and he said it exactly. I couldn't agree more. Pinchas didn't act on his own. He acted as mitoch hakal. Vayakam mitoch hakal. He stood up. Pinchas stood up. Vayamod Pinchas. What does that mean? It's like you need someone to stand up and be a man. He stood up. Mitoch b'nei Yisrael. He stood up from among the Jewish people. He wasn't doing it as a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol, the future Kohen Gadol. He was doing it as Amcha, as anybody. You did it to show that even though the Jews have sinned, there are people among the Jews, not just Moshe Rabbeinu. Who cares? Of course Moshe is good. Of course Aaron is good. It wasn't their job. Don't blame them for falling on their face and praying at a time like this. Their job is to inspire new leadership. And they did. Pinchas stood up and he says, I remember what you taught me, Moshe. We must take action. With that, the king, God, was appeased. Although he showed how mad God was at the Jews, he killed 24,000 people in a plague. He was about to kill us all. It was over. There was nothing to discuss. We've discussed enough with the golden calf and the spies and Korah. This is it. There's no other tricks. But somehow, Pinchas, by showing what a plain Jew could do, a simple Jew who had no status. Then God was appeased. That's why Moshe didn't do it. There are a lot of writers today who say that Moshe failed in the story. No, Moshe couldn't do it because the question was, do the Jews stand up for what's right? Do the Jews care? Are the Jews part of this enterprise or not? And Moshe couldn't solve that problem. He couldn't be the Jews. But Pinchas could. Pinchas represented the Amcha, just anybody. It had to be a simple person. And according to this Rashi, he had no status. He wasn't anointed until now because he was meant to be this Mr. Nobody who stands up and saves the day. And it's a tikkun, it's a fixing of the rebellion of Korach, where the masses were swept up with Korach, where the Levites were the problem. Here, the Levites solves the problem, and the masses are represented by Pinchas, who saves the day. So look at all the tikkunim that take place in this book. We showed last week the masses are redeemed in the story of Chukat. The masses are redeemed by virtue of their tshuva, by virtue of their victories of conquering the land. And Levi is redeemed. Pinchas redeems the Levites. He redeems Korach. And the Nesiim are redeemed in the sense that the Amcha, the people stand up and do something. And the firstborn are redeemed. The firstborn are redeemed here because Pinchas is a firstborn and he redeems them as well. So we've shown that in the book of Bemidbar, the things got really bad. Korach went to a low point. In Chukat, things were getting much better and things were doing great. I have argued in the past that things were doing great, but everything was not completely gone and forgotten. The Jews had still been very sinful. So you could look at it that the Jews were very sinful, and God said, all right, let me take you to Israel anyway. And then they did this, they were really doomed. And then came Pinchas. That's what I argued in the past. However, you could also argue that the Jews were doing great. They were repenting, they were creating a new generation, they were doing much better. But then there was this one moment where they were about to descend into a low point that they'd never reached before, an acts of licentiousness and idolatry. And it was at that moment that Pinchas saved the day, and he redeemed all the strata of society that were supposed to be a help to Moshe. And they changed the whole fate of the Jewish people. And therefore, Pinchas is an extremely important hero in this book. Pinchas is the one who reclaims the role of the masses in helping and being part of the nation that helps Moshe to lead the Jews, to be part of the Jews. And with this, Pinchas now becomes part of the leadership himself, but he starts off not as a leader, but just as an Amcha, just as anybody, and just as a somebody who stands up and shows that indeed Moshe is not alone, Aaron is not alone, Elazar, his father, is not alone. The Jewish people have masses. There are people who are behind Moshe, and they know what to do. And he did it. He killed those sinners, and with that, he saved so many lives. He atoned for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people from then on were so. Once Pinchas did this very audacious act, and then Pinchas indeed had saved the day.